Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Virtual College Conference. My name is Ivan Durant, and I am the proud superintendent of the Bellevue School District. As you all know, we are nearly at the 1-year mark from when we closed our school buildings due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Typically, this event is held in person over the course of 2 evenings with up to 800 parents and students attending each night. This event has been in person since its beginning more than 10 years ago. This will be the first year we hold the college conference as a virtual event. I want to take a moment to thank all of our counselors and educators who have worked so hard to provide the best learning environments for all of our students. I have always been impressed by how our educators support our students, but over this last year, it has truly been remarkable. This past week, we celebrated National School Counseling Week. This year's theme was All In for All Students. I know our school counselors were all in for your students, and I am grateful for their leadership, service, and hope they provide to all of our students. Tonight, you will be able to participate in some amazing sessions. As I review the sessions, I was excited to see the wide range of offerings. Matter of fact, I was thinking to myself, I wish I would have had this type of offerings when I was in high school. From attending a university to serving our country through the military. There are sessions about making college affordable to writing an effective essay. There are some wonderful panelists and panels who are going to be working and serving you tonight. I want to thank all of our presenters, panelists, and moderators who are joining us for this night from all over the country. Before I introduce our keynote speaker tonight, I want to remind everyone, we are not through this pandemic. It has affected people in different ways, and we have to be conscious and mindful as community members. I encourage everyone to please wear a mask when in public, follow the physical distancing guidelines, wash your hands, and please do your part so we can keep the cases going lower, so we can expand more in-person learning and services to our students. Thank you. It is now my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, Paul Seegert. Paul is a director of admissions at the University of Washington. Thank you all. Stay healthy and safe. Paul, I hand it over to you now.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Again, my name is Paul, and I worked in college admissions in various roles at the University of Washington for 22 years. And for the past 6 years, I've been the director of admissions. I have a pretty good sense of what is happening in the state and in the country regarding admissions, and I'll share a bit of what I'm seeing and how I think it might affect you, whether you're applying to colleges this year or next year or a few years out. The expert speakers you'll hear from later in this program, and they really are good, they'll be able to answer some of your more specific questions. One of the most common questions posed to admissions directors lately is sort of what the outlook is going to be with the pandemic in terms of classes in person or not. So regarding for living on campus and classes, and of course, by the time most of you apply, we're going to be beyond this pandemic. But I'll give you an idea of what's happening now, and then and kind of when I think things are really going to start to be changing. So regarding living on campus, that's actually already been happening at most universities, including the UW, and it'll definitely continue this fall. And of course, we hope that next year at the beginning of the year, if not sometime during next year, things will like totally get back to normal. But yeah, students are even living on campus now, even though most classes are virtual. Regarding in-person classes this fall, every statement from every university that I've read, including my own institution, says that they're intending to be in person in the fall, with the possible exception of large lecture classes and really large gatherings. So that's the expectation. If you read the fine print, there are almost always caveats, of course, in case something goes badly with COVID, but as long as the outlook is good for vaccines, universities all want to and expect to be in person in the fall, and they're going to be in person as much as possible. So many of you are going to be applying for colleges even a year out from that, and so we really expect to be back to normal for all of that, to have gatherings, football games, all of that. But things are even happening now. There are some in-person classes even now, and there are students living on campus. Regarding the pandemic-related changes to grading scales, extracurriculars, the inability to take or retake the SAT right now, college admissions offices they're being very flexible, and I think adapting really, really well. College admissions officers are committed to not letting pandemic-related changes affect your ability to get into college. I think something that's worth keeping in mind is that even pre-pandemic, the vast majority of colleges accept the vast majority of their applicants. And the more competitive universities like the UW have holistic reviews and consider challenging and unique circumstances. So when you apply to colleges that have personal statements and holistic reviews, and maybe you weren't able to take some courses that you normally would have taken, or there was just some other issues that maybe you didn't do as well in some classes as you would have. You were dealing with some things. We really want to know about those. We can really deal with those unique circumstances. We can really take that into consideration, and that's something that colleges have been doing well for years, and I think are doing well during the pandemic. Regarding the SAT or the ACT, those test scores at most colleges, certainly for students that are applying this year, are just non-factors, since most applicants were not able to take the test. Now beyond this year, as long as students are able to take the test, I must say many universities are going test optional, and it is really confusing what that means, because it means different things at different places. But rather than try to dissect that, and really this isn't the place to do that, I mean, there's just too many differences at too many institutions. I actually want to just tell you about a little bit about test scores in general. Even before the pandemic, test scores were perceived to have far more of an effect on admissions than they actually did. Most universities have long reported that courses and grades are the most significant academic factors, not test scores. And that makes sense, since courses and grades represent 4 years of college preparation, and those tests are just a measure of particular performance on a particular day. Courses and grades, those are the academic factors that I hear are most important to colleges. That was true pre-pandemic, it's true this year, and it's going to be true in the future. So even if you're applying to a college that still that still requires test scores, or they're test optional, I really urge you to, if you're able to take the test safely in the future, that's fine. But I really would not put too much emphasis on that and stress that so much. I would put more emphasis on taking challenging classes and doing as well as you can in your classes, and just keep in mind test scores are not, they just have not, and they are not, and they in the future I believe are going to be even less of a significant factor for colleges. I can tell you at the University of Washington, we, starting this year and in the future, this is now a permanent change for us, we're not even looking at test scores when we do our holistic reviews on our applications. So they are just not part of the holistic review anymore. We just focus on the grades and the courses, and that trend I think is really going to be happening more and more across the country. So another question often posed to admissions directors is whether the pandemic will make admissions more or less competitive this year and in the future. The answer to that depends partly on where you're applying. Generally speaking, students tend to be gravitating, this year at least, a little more to well-known college brands, flagship universities like the UW, and the more competitive and well-known independent colleges and universities. There was a note there, I just wanted to make sure people can still hear me okay. So so applications, so students tend to be applying a little bit more to the well-known universities. It's a national trend this year, and it follows a national trend last year that saw fairly stable enrollments at the same well-known colleges and universities, despite the fact that college enrollments were down nationally. I'm going to tell you how I think that's going to affect things this year, and I suspect that this effect will maybe be not quite as significant this year, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit of this in the next few years too, where when things are uncertain, and also, you know, and an economic downturn, you know, if there is one, or if one continues, that can add uncertainty. When there's uncertainty, students do tend to gravitate a little bit more towards sort of well-known colleges, and so that's what we're seeing right now. So the story is different at many other colleges, which make up the vast majority of colleges across the country, many of whom saw enrollment declines last year and have received fewer applications this year. So the good news here for current high school students and students applying in the next few years, I think, is that admissions will probably be, I'm guessing, a little less competitive at the vast majority of colleges and universities. Enrollments have been down at community colleges as well, and there is definitely room for every one of you who wants to go to college. And I can tell you that in the state of Washington, you will get an excellent education at any of our public 2-year or 4-year colleges or independent colleges. And if you start at a 2-year college and earn an academic associate's degree, that is an excellent stepping stone to a Washington 4-year college university. But what about the larger name brand universities like the UW? You know, what if that trend continues where students are gravitating more towards those universities, which was happening even pre-pandemic, and I think happened a little bit more. Well, most of those universities, including the UW, as I said, did receive more applications this year, sort of have been, and that does likely mean that admissions will be a little bit more competitive, but I think just a little more competitive. So, for example, at the UW, Washington residents, and this is pretty typical with public universities. So University of Washington is just the example I'll give. So at the University of Washington residents compete only with other Washington residents. So we enroll as many residents as we can, given state funding. And at the UW, that happens to be about 4,400 Washington resident freshmen each year, and about 1,200 Washington community college transfer applicants. Keep that in mind. That's a lot of community college transfer applicants. So this year we did receive a record number of applications. It was about 13,000 applications. It's a lot of applications. That might sound scary. 4,400 spaces, 13,000 applications. However, all universities have to make more offers than they have enrollment space, because not all students accept those offers. So at the UW, we typically need to make about 7,500 offers to enroll about 4,400 students. If you do the math, that would amount to an admit rate of about 58%. About 58% of Washington resident applicants offered admission. Now, I don't know if that seems higher than you expect or lower than you expect, but to compare, the average admit rate for Washington residents the past few years at the UW has been about 60%. So this coming year, 58% should be a drop, but not a huge drop. But for those of you who are applying a year or two out, one thing that often happens is that when the admit rate drops a little bit, then not as many people tend to apply the next year. So that could that could rebalance a little bit, and I could easily imagine the admit rate kind of going back up to about 60%. So I think really things are going to be fairly stable there in Washington in terms of the UW. And then, like I said, I suspect that in the next few years, applications and enrollments might be down a little bit at many of the other universities. So I really think that that it is going to be a good couple of years to be applying to colleges and universities. But remember, it's more competitive for non-residents. Non-residents are competing for far fewer spaces, and just like that's true for students coming from out of state coming to the UW, it's more competitive for them here. If you want to go out of state to a flagship out of state or a competitive other university out of state, it's going to be probably more competitive for you as a non-resident. Now, another phenomenon that students who are applying to colleges this year we're experiencing, on average, they're applying to more universities. So those who are applying to more universities. They're casting a wider net. And you know, that's a trend that we have been seeing over the years. That's not just the pandemic. It's a trend that seems to be continuing with the pandemic. So that has just the opposite effect on admit rates. So students who apply to more colleges, they decline the offers at more colleges, which can result in the need for colleges to make even more offers than usual, even at universities like the UW. So that can be a rebalancing effect. So we're receiving more applications, but we might end up needing to make more offers, and that's another reason why I think things are going to stabilize in terms of admit rates. I still think, on balance, yeah, it's likely, at least this year, to be more competitive, a little bit more competitive for universities that receive more applications. But I suspect things will really adjust in the next couple of years. But you know, when things are uncertain, another thing to keep in mind is that admissions directors really can't know for sure exactly how many offers to make, and we have to be careful not to make too many, because if the university is over-enrolled, then there's not enough space for everybody, and then that's not good for students. So you know, we have to have the right number of students. So in times of uncertainty, we tend to be a little bit more cautious when we make initial offers, and then see how students are accepting their offers, but then have large wait lists. And I think that's a trend that was happening even before the pandemic. It's increased with the pandemic, and I think it's gonna increase the next few years until there's sort of more stabilization on applicants and enrollment spaces. So that's something to keep in mind. I think more students are gonna end up be put on wait lists, but then also admitted off of wait lists. So I think ultimately the chances of admission are still probably going to be similar, but more students unfortunately might have to go through that wait list process, and that's not a fun process. But if it ends up getting you where you want to go, it's at least an avenue for doing that, and that's just something to keep in mind. I think that there's going to be more use of wait lists in the future. But again, I just want to, with this topic, and then I'm going to go into one more topic. I just want to remind you again, please remember that the vast majority of the universities will likely admit a greater percentage of their applicants this year, and I suspect over the next few years. And overall, I think it is going to be a good few years to be applying to colleges. So now I'm going to just give you a little bit of advice before I leave you here. Believe it or not, admissions officers don't want the college admissions process to be stressful. We really don't. And when giving advice and trying to help sort of de-stress students, we tend to vacillate between trying to ease your mind by pointing out how most students do end up attending their first choice college, or we could vacillate the other way and encourage you to not become emotionally invested in only one college, because not everyone is able to attend their first choice college. And I'm actually going to focus on the latter. When it comes to success and happiness, I really think it matters far more what you do with your time in college than where you go to college. And I think that, for me, that's partly informed by my background. So I grew up in the state of Wisconsin, in a small paper mill town in the middle of the state. I wasn't a very good student in high school, and I was not competitive for my state's flagship university, which was the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So I went to a small regional public university where I ended up majoring in philosophy, and And over time I did better and better there, and I ended up ending really strong, and strong enough to be admitted for graduate school to UW-Madison, where I earned a master's degree in philosophy. So I ended up there. It was just a different path to get there, and in terms of the field of study, the way I chose that now seems quaint. I majored in what was the most meaningful to me, and I just hoped that a career in something would eventually follow. And after graduate school, I went into the Peace Corps in Papua New Guinea, which is an island nation just north of Australia. And after the Peace Corps, I moved to Seattle just because it seemed like a place that I'd like to live, and I love it. And 22 years later, that career did follow. So, I started at a small regional public university, and now I'm the director of admissions at one of the world's preeminent universities in the world. And you can, again, it's sort of, it's not necessarily where you start, but what you do with where you are. And I'm going to leave you with just a little bit of data on how recent graduates look back on their college choices. These aren't UW graduates. This is a national survey. In fact, it's from a Gallup survey. So in this survey, 4 in 5 Americans who completed a college degree said that they received a high quality education. 4 in 5 said that they received a high quality education. And this is a national survey, and I think if it was in Washington, it would be higher, because we really have just excellent colleges and universities in the state of Washington. They all are. So like I said, no matter where you go, you're going to receive a high quality education. However, I think something that's interesting is they were asked if they could do it all over again, if they would change anything, and at least half would have either pursued a different major or attended a different institution. So if you focus those to just bachelor's degree holders, 40% said that they would study a different major if they could do it all over again. And 25% said that they would attend a different institution. So the reason I'm leaving you with this is just that I really think it's best to not get too emotionally invested in getting into one college or one major. I urge you to keep your minds and options open and embrace wherever you land. Make the most of wherever you land. And with that, I'm just going to wish you health and happiness, as little stress as possible through this process. I hope you actually enjoy it. Hopefully in the fall, you'll be able to start taking campus tours and get on campuses again. Until then, take advantage of virtual visit options. And I hope this program tonight is helpful. You're going to hear from a lot of really great experts. So I wish you well. Good night.
Thank you, Paul Seegert, for your strong and positive opening to our 2021 BSD Virtual College Conference. For all of you who are out there, thank you very much for joining us. Just a few reminders on how to join sessions. You can go to the college conference page on the BSD website. You'll find session descriptions and links to join. So the web address is there. You can also just go to the BSD main page and search for College Conference in the search box, and it will take you directly to the page, and it has all of the links to join. You will have a chance to join up to 3 live sessions tonight. The first one starts at 6:40. We have our second session starting at 7:20 and our final session at 8 o'clock. I encourage you to return to the College Conference page to submit feedback for our college conference tonight and to access videos and session materials that will be posted there later this week. Thank you for joining us and have a great night.